Well, hello 1Ls. We're going to talk today about benchmark fractions. Yeah, benchmark just means fractions that you're going to see most often. And I know fractions, yeah, it's everybody's favorite F word, but we're going to see if we can get through this. So today's learning goal, I can identify benchmark fractions and visually show the representation. So let's talk about what a fraction means. So this first fraction we're talking about is a half. You should know what a half means. A half means that I have one whole thing and I've split it down the middle into two parts. And I can take one of those things and that is half of it. If I have two halves, I have the whole thing again. So two halves make a whole. So two halves, or we'll say two halves, equal one whole. That's because we got a half by just cutting it into two. So this bottom of a fraction tells us how many pieces to cut the whole into. How many pieces to cut. Now the top half tells us how many pieces we have. So this technically is two halves here. To have one half, I have to get rid of one of these pieces. So I'm just going to hit delete and that's gone. This is actually one half right there. Now we'll go on to the next one because halves are pretty easy. If I asked you to draw me a half or shade in a half, you could just draw something and cut it into two parts. It doesn't have to be a circle. You can draw a square or a rectangle. And if I wanted you to draw me a picture of half, you could cut it into half and just shade in one side. And this would be half. Now that's approximately half because I didn't do a very good job of splitting it down the middle. This looks like it's bigger than this other part. But that's one way you could represent it. Now we're going to move on. Oh, that says an eighth and a quarter. I think we've got those mixed up. That's crazy. This says an eighth and this says a quarter, but remember I told you that the bottom is how many pieces it's split into? Take a look. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, and down here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think I made a boo-boo and we should put these the other direction. Okay, now this has been split into four parts. So let's take a look here. What other fractions can I make out of here? Well, if I take one piece, now I split the whole into four parts, but I only have one piece. So that one piece is actually 1/4. Now, if I take two pieces, 1, 2, that is 2/4. Because remember I told you the top is going to tell you how many pieces you have and the bottom tells you how many pieces it takes to make up a whole part. Now, doesn't this 2/4 look kind of familiar? It looks very much like this 1/2 that we had up here. If I take this 1/2 and put it down here, it's the same thing as the 2/4. So that means that 2/4 is actually the same as 1/2. Now we did 1/4, 2/4. We could also do 3/4. So what's 3/4 going to look like? 1, 2, 3/4. So there's a chunk missing to make it whole. This is 3/4. And again, you could just, if I asked you to draw me 3/4, you just take some kind of shape, split it into four parts, and shade in three of them. And that is 3/4. Remember, bottom tells you how many pieces to split it into, and the top tells you how many of those pieces you actually have. Now let's do it with eighths. Here's 1/8. Well, this is a whole. Remember, 8/8 equals a whole. So 8/8. That's kind of hard to say, isn't it? 8/8 equals one whole. So let's take a look at what else we can have here. This is 1/8. So it's a tiny little piece. If I have 2/8, well, that's kind of looking familiar, isn't it? So let's put 1/8 on this one. If I have 2/8, what does that look like? I think that shape looks kind of familiar. Oh, what if I rotate it a little bit and it's like, oh yeah, it looks like the quarter. So those things kind of, they look the same. That must mean that when I have 2/8, that's the same as 1/4. Well, that's kind of neat. What about 3/8? 1, 2, 3. Well, 3/8, it doesn't really look like any of the other pieces we've come across. So this is 3/8. And 4/8. Let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, 4/8 make up half of the whole. We can actually see that. That looks like it was a half. So 4/8 is the same thing as 1/2. Now you can draw this too. If I asked you to draw me, say 6/8, all you have to do is take something, remember the bottom, if I'm going to draw 6/8, if this says 6/8, I have to split this into 6 parts. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and then 1 across the middle gives me 6 parts. Oh, I don't want 6 parts. I want 8 parts. The top tells me how many are shaded in. So I've got 6 parts. I need 2 more. So let's make this out there. Now we have 8 parts. And 6 tells me how many of those parts I actually have. So I got to shade in 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And those will have some of those shapes will be equivalent up here too, but that is how we think about these. Remember, 8/8 is 1 whole, 4/4, or another thing we call that quarter. Let's go quarter. Kind of like there's 4 quarters in a dollar, there's 4 quarters in a whole, or we say 4/4 as well. 4/4 equals 1 whole thing. Okay, so we will leave it at that. I think you have, yep, looks like it. You have a worksheet.